Coalescing across Tidal, the sound of countless many form a singular stream of migratory action. Shaking off the slumbering silt, they rise from the dark depths. Apart but in unison, disparate males and females adhere to the beckoning call of procreation. Like a moth to a flame, they commit to the spawning grounds and must accept whatever consequences the journey may bring. Their collective synchrony is remarkable and takes perspective to appreciate. Normally buried in the muddy sea bottom, they only come out when food or sex are on the table. In the case of the latter, a seasonal lust springs them into action like champagne corks on New Year's Eve. Emerging from their vampiric coffins, the aggregation is disarming as it takes shape. One becomes two, becomes 300,000. Trickling streams of black feeding into a mighty river, the marching mass of fins conquers the cerulean plain like ants on a picnic. Resembling a supersized Sar shark, they are Oncopristi, an extinct member of the skate family. These horny, thorny creatures lived during the Cretaceous period and have the length of a great white shark with the face of a hedge trimmer. Like great whites, males are the smaller sex and females are responsible for driving the species' existence. Flat and ray-like, onks were bottom dwellers and used their primary weapon to disturb ocean soil, eating whatever prey they could uproot. More on their snout or rostrum, it was upwards of 6 feet long and lined on either side with 2-inch barbs. Thorny indeed, their extended nasal appendage would have been equally effective in combat. Versatile animals, Oncopristi were capable of living in salt and fresh water. Fossils have been discovered in the prehistoric seaway of North America and the floodplains of northern Africa. Spread out across Tidal's infinite expanse, they only congregate to procreate. Drawn by Pa's periodic bloom, they salmon upriver to breed and encounter all manner of opportunists along the way. Oncopristi are most vulnerable when initially aggregating. Between the security blanket and safety in numbers, each onk must pass through a cloaked zone, an intermediate phase of danger where few become many. This layer of Tidal is as opaque as it is ominous, filled with teethy jaws. Similar to plaques of amyloid assembling decades before grandma's dementia, this moment of transition is precious for exploitation. With capable defenses and darkness in their favor, the thornfish shouldn't be afraid of anything. But any things? That is a different matter. Tracking a cohort of oligomerizing onks is our benevolent Basilosaurus, Sam. Echolocation off the ocean floor enables him to sense the onk's awakening, but he is blind in the black water. Not because there is no light, but because cancer has rotted out the backs of his eyes. Whales are normally resistant to malignancies, but this unlucky cetacean has mutation in his retinoblastoma or RB genes. A critical regulator of cell division, defective copies of this gene result in uncontrolled tissue growth, but carriers of a single mutation are otherwise healthy. In this instance, Sam was already holding RB baggage and recently developed golf ball-sized tumors where his retina should be. Acute sonar hunters, whales aren't known for their vision, but they cannot survive long without it. Remarkably, in Tidal's arms, what should be a death sentence for the flukeal has actually become a rebirth. A fortuitous partnership with an adolescent ichthyosaurus that has both living a life unheard of to either species. Born with a single RB mutation, Sam's vision has been in decline since passing through the Tropic of Tola. Extinguishing the local warlord must have cost him his healthy copy, and over the past quanta his eyes have seen their last. In that time, he and the little ichthy have formed a bond that has made the ancient connection between Basilosaurus and Episthomycin obsolete. Sam's lone lieutenant, Benji, has become the sole beneficiary of the flukeal's scraps, a privilege he has earned by illuminating the cloak zone with his black cutting eyes. A brave scout in blinding darkness, Benji seals the gap Sam sightlessness leaves behind. With capable sonar, the Basilosaurus can find prey in the murkiest water, but a lack of short-range vision has left the otherwise ferocious predator gun-shy. Prey or fellow hunter, the flukeal can never be sure what he is stalking. Strong as they are, his jaws aren't the mightiest in Tidal, and he has things to fear. Benji has cultivated enormous trust from the Basilosaurus, facing what Sam's mind can find but not see. Earning him ink along the way, the once but whitefish lizard now has the shadowed gleam of a jungle cat, and is just as cunning. Using his mind rather than his flesh to fill the void in his compatriot's belly, Benji has skillfully brokered peace between eel and ichthy. A well-fed tiger has no appetite for pie, especially when all he can see is the backcoat of a panther. Traditionally an epipelagic hunter, Sam's vulnerability magnetized him below the sunny surface waters. A monster in hiding, he couldn't allow himself to be a sitting duck out in the open for opportunists. Secluded in the cloak zone, the flukeal's handicap left room for a bit of magic. Benji's ability to safely snuff out prey in the black water. Always more curious than afraid, the Sabadot explored signals Sam chose to ignore. The daring fish lizard coaxing the ferocious Basilosaurus out of his fear. Ironically, what started out as a cowardly escape for the fluke eel has become ascension to a higher, albeit lower plane. One where challenge begets opportunity. Away from danger, if only in his mind, Sam throws this land of the blind with Benji's all-seeing eyes. A willing servant, the Lilithty enjoys finding his king more substantial meals than himself. So much so that his duty has become the very essence of the fish lizard's existence. True hunter-prey living in harmony, neither truly hunter nor prey. Approaching the amoeba of individuals, the Basilosaurus prepares his assault. Benji's familiar signature, woven into the invisible cluster, signals to the fluke eel that the prey are safe to hunt. Had the large, unfamiliar mass been chasing the fish lizard, Sam would be gearing up for a different sort of attack. Exploding through the cloud of bodies, the Basilosaurus T-bones an Onchopristy just behind the dorsal fin. Twerking in his toothy jaws, the randy female thrashes against her invisible captor, her boudoir rostrum carving only water. Moving in with his grinding molars, Sam cracks through the Onch's spine. Her business and silence, the thornfish's tail idly flaps its last. Abandoned by the oligomers, she is but one of the many casualties along the path to fornication. Drawing rivers of Onchopristy is the meadow paw. Paw stands for Proterochladus anticus, a prehistoric ocean seagrass that periodically grows into a heavenly meadow just outside the Onch's freshwater spawning grounds. Uncovered in northern China, fossilized within billion-year-old rock, this ancient green seaweed is thought to be one of the earliest photosynthetic organisms and perhaps the first marine plant. Small and thread-like, paw only grew to be a few millimeters on your world, but here when Kyra chooses to meadow, jade rope strands can be hundreds of feet long. Bushing up from the depths every 19 quanta, it is the meadow paw that baits the thornfish into bumping. Growing in a fan shape, the meadow paw begins a mile or so offshore and yellow bricks the eager beavers to the mating delta. There in the lustful bush they orgy. Clasper meets cloaca, and the act of insemination is completed and repeated. But whereas both males and females are attracted to the delta to copulate, only the females continue upstream. Cleansing breeding filth with brackish water, the fertilized females carry their wombs to waters more pure than tidal. Up falls and rapids, through opportunists the mothers will push, all to bury their mermaid purse in the very mire from whence they emerged. Males, on the other hand, will remain in the mating delta, planting pearls in empty clutches until the seagrass empties of females or fills with predators. Boundaring the delta is an opening in the shore cliffs, a mouth to one of the continent's rivers. Zial's shelf resembles a missing encyclopedia volume above the busy seagrass, and Tidal's edge rises until it mixes with the freshwater portal. Flooding the Niagara-wide doorway for a few precious units every cycle, Tidal elevators pregnant onks up to the spawning channel and holds it open until Eclipse and drops him like a guillotine. Freddy is in over his head. Another teenager in Tidal's Jedi cohort, he has more horn than thorn. Only 8 feet long, a third of its snout, he is out of place at the meadow paw and will find more pain here than pleasure. Snaking through the long grass, he has managed to bunk with females twice his age and size, only to be chased off by heavier bulls with hulkier claspers. But that isn't to say his flesh is unwelcome here. Stalking the outcast among the fucking is a mouth that you wouldn't want to poke at a party. Fanged with daggered teeth, Triple X has the face of a piranha and the body of a gargantuan mahi-mahi. As a factinus, he is a 20-foot sword ray that lived during the late Cretaceous and is as creepy as they come. Zephactinus was an insatiable predator and, much like tiger sharks, would have swallowed anything it could get into its stomach. Comparable in size to a full-grown Onchopristy, Triple X can handle adult onks, but he is happy to suck down younglings like Freddy. Lurking above the seagrass, he trolls for horny guppies and then watches as they get bounced around the bullpen. Idling in stasis, the monster pauses for an opening. Waiting while his prey becomes more and more vulnerable. Determined to pearl a cloaca, Freddy bumps all he can. Powered by youth, his hormones drive him beyond his limits, and the tweeny onk finds himself battered. Thrashed and thorned by non-consenting females, and a few males, the juvenile considers a new strategy. Crowded in the reedy jungle, there is little chance he will happen upon a similarly sized female. Above the jade rope in the open water canopy, however, he will have a watchtower perspective and be in better position to find a willing womb. Coming about to eject from the path, Freddy has ruined everything. Watching his every failure, Triple X has been waiting for the thornfish to hesitate. A moment of calm between bumps, and then the slaughter. Striking from behind, the Zefactinus can swallow most of the animal whole. Icicling through his prey's face, the attack will circumvent Freddy's edges, allowing Triple X to pillage his hole. But Freddy has unknowingly turned the tables on his stalker. Meeting the piranical tuna's charge head-on, the thornfish's barbed wire snout is on a collision course for the back of Triple X's throat. Exposed and gaping, the Zefactinus has gone from sword ray to sword sheath. Slidden into his stalker, Freddy will devastate Triple X from the inside, maiming blood vessels and internal organs with his prick-billy club. Astonishing as this theater may be, an unsurprising factoid about Zefactinus is that its eyes were known to be bigger than its stomach. At the Sternberg Museum of Natural History in Hays, Kansas, there is an incredible fossil of a perfectly preserved 13-foot Zefactinus with an intact fish 6 feet long inside. The swallowed body was undigested, and it is assumed that the strongly prey ruptured the larger predator's entrails, and both animals died. Now imagine swallowing a chainsaw, or perhaps being buried alive in a flesh coffin. Neither animal clearly having the upper hand, it will likely be the scavengers that win this one. If Freddy can somehow dislodge himself before he suffocates, the young thornfish may still yet be able to fornicate. One thing he has learned being trapped inside a swimming dead carcass is that lurking works. Just inside Zyal's shelf, the female onks must pass through a congregation of opportunists that very much resembles the bears of Brooks Falls. Inland from the Gulf of Alaska, this region of your world is known for its 500-pound grizzlies assembling in unison to guzzle down salmon making their run. For the most part, they eat harmoniously through the summer season, but fights will occur over ideal fishing spots. A similar drama plays out here, the chiral difference being that the fish spawning up the river Zyal are bigger than any grizzly, and their reaper, well, unequal to death itself. Only in the estuarial strait are the largest terrestrial predators Earth's kitchen has ever cooked up. Bigger than Tyrannosaurus rex, this late Cretaceous carnivore was upwards of 60 feet long and would have weighed in excess of 40,000 pounds. A mythical creature, this opportunist was a 100-year mystery and establishes the very ceiling of terror. Discovered in 1912, fossils of Spinosaurus were found in the sands of Central Egypt. Among the original artifacts was the lower jaw of an extended snout spiked with conical teeth, and a series of broad back spines, some over 5 feet long. The self-evident name of spined lizard came in 1915 when the full form of this monster eluded paleontologists into the next century. But the full form of this monster eluded paleontologists into the next century. The standing hypothesis at the time was that Spinosaurus was bipedal and stood upright with short arms, much like T-Rex, which itself had just been described in 1905. Like most dinosaur depictions of the early 20th century, recreations of Spinosaurus were of a tall standing animal with a tail dragging behind. The purpose of the creature's enigmatic back spines remained elusive, but there was hope that more fossils would fill in the blanks. Not only would paleontologists have to wait decades to find more bones, evidence of Spinosaurus in hand would become a casualty of World War. A British bombing raid over Munich, Germany in April of 1945 blasted one Spinosaurus out of existence a second time. Thankfully, detailed photographs and descriptions had been captured. In the early 1970s, a repository of Spinosaurus bones was uncovered across the African continent in Morocco. As pieces began falling into place, misassumptions of Spinosaurus were identified. First, the notion of standing upright. Spinosaurus's arms were longer and legs shorter than imagined, which suggests a quadrupedal posture. These new artifacts populated voids not just in what Spinosaurus looked like, but also how it lived. During that time of the late Cretaceous, Morocco would have been a seasonal river valley, periodically flooded with ocean spawners, including Onchopristi. Analysis of their teeth, more specifically oxygen isotope ratios, suggests that Spinosaurus had a semi-aquatic lifestyle, similar to reptile amphibians. New specimens, including an upper jaw, provided evidence of a crocodile-like face with nostrils high up on the creature's snout and water pressure sensors at its end. This arrangement was sought to facilitate shore-based hunting, whereby Spinosaurus would stand in the shallows and dangle the tip of its 6-foot snout into the water. Its motion sensing end below the water, air-breathing nostrils held well above, the colossal predator could wait indefinitely for something tasty to pass by. Then in 2018, the proverbial smoking gun was discovered, a vertebrate fossil of Spinosaurus's tail. Flat and oar-shaped like an alligator's, this was irrefutable evidence that Spinosaurus used its fifth appendage for propulsion rather than as a walking counterbalance. A stronger swimmer than runner, Spinosaurus lived and hunted in water. And if that is the case, its mysterious back spines may have supported aquatic mobility, a dorsal fin perhaps, cut in the shape of a butcher's cleaver. An armada of sailboats on the horizon, the grizzlies make their way down the Zia. The first mother onks have reached the dropping soil, cueing the upstream opportunists that the Pa is on. With their jagged back blades slicing through empty air, there is a mighty calm above the surface. But below, arms tucked in tight, the spined lizards power through the brackwater. Cleaving forward with their skulled tails, each butcher powers ahead to secure a tsavo, a place of slaughter. Stepstoning across the Alps shelf is a porous boundary between salt and freshwater bodies. A rock formation fingering up from the silt, the string of towers resembles a row of gravestones and are equally synonymous with death. Most visible at low Z, each riser is all but drowned by tidal as he brines the continent. At high Z, when the seawater reaches maximum height, the dry tower tops mogul the river's surface and become tsavos during the onk run. Perfectly positioned for getting and gutting, each tsavo provides a single grizzly with a place to butcher. Securing a place of slaughter is imperative because Spinosaurus is a weak hunter. A colossal killer, yes, but not a resilient one. Gorging when times were good, spined lizards struggled when rivers ran dry, and they perished well before the end of the Cretaceous. Fossils co-occurring in the same region, namely oncopristi barbs embedded in the jaws of Spinosaurus, are signs of rich feeding opportunities. Additionally, onc-spine vertebrate fragments have been found lodged in Spinosaurus's teeth cavities, leading to the presumption that they preferred the posterior muscle meat of oncopristi, the juicy back fat that powered the thornfish's tail. Unfortunately, as North Africa dried into the desert we know today, so did Spinosaurus. Their jaw strength was relatively weak, roughly 1/100th of T-Rex, and their back sail prevented any kind of death roll tactic to disable prey. Instead, they relied on 8-inch claws to work through large kills and needed a place to do it. With the tsavo secured, they can haul in thornfish one at a time and slaughter them on land. The armada arrives at Newlight before the run comes. Spread out across the estuarial breakwater, each in the gang of giants arrives at a rock base to stake their claim. Scaling the dead stones, they pivot from swimmer to climber, their focus churn unbroken. Huge and menacing, they use their webbed talons to fight against gravity and later each other. Ascending each tower are 2 or 3 butchers, but only one can hold tsavo and carnage here for the running season. When the first grizzly reaches the summit, it immediately defecates. Marking its territory won't deter the other butchers, but the scent will establish dominance over the limited real estate and prevent rivals from doing the same. Combat occurs when a second grizzly reaches the brow, and often before. Patrolling the small perimeter, the sitting butcher will stage offensive attacks against climbing challengers. Locked in fisticuffs like a pair of back-finned Komodo dragons, the Spinosaurus jockey for position, with the largest creature often dominating. Sometimes it pays to arrive third, emerging just in time to railroad incumbent and contender into the water. Then again, it isn't unheard of for 2 grizzlies to butcher a third before turning on each other. While invaluable for predatory advantage, holding tsavo can also be a hauntful experience, most especially for the grisliest of butchers. Prey in such abundance is rare, and Spinosaurus is easily intoxicated by live organs and rich back fat. So much so that they will readily discard a majority of each ankh carcass for the pleasure of fresh fish, a tactic that also helps avoid scavengers from assembling in numbers to drive them off. The hedonistic run will last for 1 bracket or 9 cycles, during which time no tsavo will be left vacant and no soul left guiltless. Inside the jetty, the water is low and calm, but soon it will be flooded with salt water and pregnant onks. Hose pinched in the breeding total below, the fertilized mothers are eager to escape the jail rope debauchery. Futilely attempting to overcome the fish bladder early, they jump in a flurry as tidal begins to rise. Jostling each other for position, they have no concept of what awaits them on the other side. Missing out on the fun is poor Saber. Pouting on the riverbank, this is his 3rd run, but by far his worst. He was little more than a hatchling when the menopause took his and a great many other ankh's virginity. Barely off mother's milk or whatever the Spinosaurus equivalent would be, he didn't bother challenging for tsavo and was happy to exploit the abundance of fin flesh left by the elders. His butchering chops earned field stripping washed up carrion in the exact spot he presently occupies. A half 38 quarter later, Saber was a bastion of male dominance. Burly and fierce, this butcher was the grisliest that run. Not only did he maintain total supremacy of his tsavo, Saber boldly challenged roosted females nearby, successfully bedding 5 under Thayer's sun moonlight. Spinelesses don't typically mix business with pleasure in this way, but the menopause makes us all a little crazy. Ejaculating on his charm during run number 2, 3rd time round has not been lucky. Now over 60 quanta, his teeth and claws aren't as many as they once were. Wounded and marooned, he enviously watches younger bucks and bambies pull in thornfish. He was among the first to catch on to the onks and arrive with the armada. But past his prime, he is well below his fighting weight and was pushed off every tsavo like a bariatric sumo wrestler. That isn't to say the run has to be a total loss. The floating carrion will feed a generation of opportunists, 12 of whom are baby butchering around their towering grandfather as he sulks. In truth, there is enough washed up onk to fill Saber's belly for the next 19 lunas or 1 quanta. But the prideful silverback refuses to settle for leftovers. I didn't come all this way for bloated bug meat. 8 cycles of brooding and all but Saber's monomania is healed. Hidden in Z light, his posture appears comfortably emeritus, seemingly above the petty pugilism of holding tsavo. But in the absence of Xenix's warmth, Nile leads to hunger. Under Thea, her clear sun moonlight as judgmental now as it was those true nights of carnal conquest, the fallen king's true nature is revealed. Scurrying across the corpse-strewn beach, he is a cockroach scavenging among the flies. The run closing is evidenced by great numbers of onks flowing in the opposite direction. Down Zial, they race back to Tidal's guardful arms and the safety of silted caskets. But the collective's mindless migration is replaced by the determination of single-minded retreat. No longer distracted by the past pull, the focused thornfish are scrappier and their frequency less predictable. Instead of billowing over the shelf in mass, the onk's counterflow is a Morse code of thorn bullets. Reading the body language of those holding tsavo, Saber senses the opportunity for easy kills expiring, kills easier and richer than he will ever taste again. Early in the run, when the onks are bottlenecked swimming upstream, grizzlies can afford to be lazy. Sunning in Z light, they will wait for Tidal to close the gap between water and land, and then haul in butcher for a unit or 2 until they coma. But now they seem impatient, unwilling to wait for Tidal to bring them their supper. Hunting off tsavo and earlier in the cycle, success requires more risk and is far less guaranteed. With the warmth of the 9th dawn, Saber commits to his misguided mission. Absorbing the morning light from the river's shallow sandbar, Ziao's rising edge slowly overtakes him. Gliding into the water, the doomed butcher projects nothing but edge. His body recovered from the neck down, Saber's monomaniac head and back cleaver are all that is visible. Swishing into Ziao's current, his mind full but his soul empty, the spined lizard is after something pure but foolish. The taste of youth as it breathes its last, to drink in life before it passes to another plane. Nearing the tsavo formation, Saber finds himself amongst other landless grizzlies. Faced downstream toward Tidal's horizon, the butchers are anticipating the onk's final charge. However, holding positions slightly upstream, the silver butcher has a different strategy. Facing into Zial, Saber is resigned to catching thorny bullets as they escape the continent. His back to the shelf, he hears the remaining onks splash over the fish ladder, and then the sound of his fellow butchers cleaving over kills. The females that make it through are marred with gore. Saber watches them flick off blood spatter as they swim past. In a moment of doubt, he audibles and chases after a female still heavy with egg. She is quick, but not quick enough, and the silver butcher catches her by the tail. Thrashing against his head, the pregnant mother fights against the old grizzly's grip until another Spinosaurus clamps down, crushing the oncopristi's face above the rostrum. In much better position, the second spine lizard wastes no time spilling the oncopristi's guts into the brack water. The confetti of Viscera draws in a third butcher, and Saber is chased off before tasting fresh flesh. Focus restored, the old grizzly returns to his upriver position, faced against the escaping thornfish. Backfin cleaving through the treadmilling surface water, anticipation rising with Tidal. But idly hovering at the surface, he is waiting for a train that won't come. Egg-free females stay close to the bottom, and for Saber to be successful, he must take his chances on the water. Time passes with no kills, and Saber is growing weary. Beating against the Zial's current is tiresome, but gives the silver butcher an opportunity to consider another adjustment, one that will be more successful than his last. Filling his lungs with air, the old grizzly dives for the riverbed. Down here, the water is murky and the butcher's vision poor. Nevertheless, he senses more thorn fish than he imagined. Returning in great numbers, he can feel highways of barbs brushing by him, and he snaps vigorously into the void. Occasionally, his jaws find onk, but the invisible momentum is furious and swats him away easily. Engaged but vulnerable, his failures are adding up. He needs to resurface. Rejuvenated with the prospect of success, Saber sprouts upward to replenish his oxygen stores. However, before he can take in fresh air, he is barreled in the chest by a cluster of onks. Asphyxiated but resolute, the silver butcher sinks every point he has into the flittering thornfish and reaches the surface with a wriggling catch in his grasp. Barbs retaliate against the old grizzly's clutch, but he can withstand the insult. Drifting back towards the formation, Saber notices an unoccupied tsavo and powers towards it. Careful to keep his catch alive, he directs his cleaving energy to his whipping tail. Moored at the tsavo, Saber repositions the twitching mass between his clamped jaws, neutralizing his victim's thorned bat. Limbs free, the grizzly butcher climbs ashore. The flip-flopping onk is dropped on dry land, and Saber pins her by the face with his mighty right hand. He eyes the resting thornfish's back fat and swivels his head to rip off a piece of living flesh. Interrupting the moment is another grizzly, a female, screeching at him from across the tsavo. Already familiar with this lady butcher, Saber's monomania wants nothing to do with this bimbo, other than perhaps to eat her live organs as well. Stepping off the thornfish, Saber charges at the challenger in a devilish high walk. Sail and tail flailing in coordinated synchrony, the silver butcher's rage is more than the female is willing to match. Her belly already well full, following a rich run season, the Bambi sees wisdom in capitulation. She withdraws her opposition and retreats into the water, chirping at the old grizzly in bitchful prose. Saber's writhing catch is getting away, and he must stop her from escaping back into the water. Landing his jaws on her caudal fin, the silver butcher flips the dying Oncopristi onto her back and pins her once again. Multiple red trails trickle from holes in the female's white belly, and the old grizzly takes a moment to survey his puncture marks. Licking iron gravy off his hole, he suddenly drives both forelimbs into the trembling onk's sternum. Arching in protest, the thornfish has no move but to hope death is swift. Using his skillful forward claws, Saber exposes the mother's chest cavity to Xenix's near full light and gazes into a still beating heart. The pulsing organ glimmers in the reflection of Saber's maniacal eyes, and the moment of rapture at last. But the high he is expecting does not come. The prospect of still beating meat in his alligator jaws is wondrous, but the actual flesh is no more nourishing than deceased tissue and does as much to restore his virility. Panicked, he snaps off a piece of back fat and again is underwhelmed. Wise in his old ways, it occurs to him that all of this effort may be misplaced. The juice not worth a squeeze, so to speak. That is, unless the silver butcher somehow missed his window. That stupid cunt! She distracted me! Resolved to try again, Saber discards the newly dead carcass and stammers back into the water. Desperate to fill his soul by stealing another, he fails to notice the other grizzlies vacating the river. Fed but still hungry, Saber abandons strategic thinking and cleaves wildly into the raised water. His compulsory slashes are in vain as the remaining Oncopristi traffic is well below the surface. Reminded of his earlier insight, he hastily returns to the depths and manages to secure a thornfish, and more easily this time. Impatient with himself, he gores the frightened fish underwater, snapping up whatever he can. Her barbs open wounds in the grizzly's mouth and hands, but that isn't what causes the spine lizard to pause his butchering. A flash in the sky above illuminates the murky depths around him. The blink of light is brilliant and reveals thousands on thousands of fleeing onk. Eclipse and leaves Saber paralyzed, but it isn't the mural of snouted black bodies swimming past that holds him in stillness. Rather, it is the realization that he has bitten off more than he can chew. Angling in threshold, the extent of his misstep is appreciated, and the silver butcher's monomania dissolves in a nano. Closing his eyes, Saber sees his fellow cleavers climbing out of the predictably volatile river, his younger, more virile self among them. Beyond the point of pulling out, the next sensation the old grizzly feels is being sucked out to sea. Freefall gives the wayward giant an opportunity for gas exchange, and he lands in Tidal's briny embrace with refreshed lungs. His 20 tons drop him below the rushing onks, and he finds himself pinned beneath the shoal. No longer interested in anything but the bliss of retreat, he struggles to make it through the rushing river of thornfish. Around and below him, the meadow paw is completely barren. Following its glorious maturation and spectacle, the mating delta is progressively stripped of by Tidal's falls. Come the run's ninth cycle, the once lustful bush is waxed to its prepubescent state. Only familiar with the pearls this climb of Tidal produces, Saber has no appreciation for seagrass and doesn't know what he is missing. After a chip, the curtain of thornfish finally disperses and the grizzly butcher is paralyzed once again. In front of him is a new heavyweight, his equal of the ocean. The very bottom of bottomless terror, she is the most dominating marine animal ever, and herself a swimming tsavo. She shares an elongated snout and paddle-like tail with spined lizards, but Pat is a superior hunter and built to queen the ocean. This killer nun in Tidal's parish is a Mosasaurus. Named after the Meuse River in Western Europe, the first fossils of this water monster were found in 1764. A chalk quarry in the Netherlands produced two enormous skulls that were initially thought to be crocodiles. In 1786, Dutch biologists classified them as whales, which attracted international attention, most notably from revolutionaries in France, who stole one of the fossils in 1794 during the French Revolution wars. The story goes that they held the skull ransom for 600 bottles of wine. But this was no whale. Expert minds at the time recognized similarities with monitor lizards, but they could not associate the enormous and terrifying skull with any modern animal. At the beginning of the 19th century, extinction itself was a novel concept, and rocked traces of Mosasaurus were used to argue for an evolved model of Earth's history, one where species could have lived and died out long before woman or man. It wasn't until 1822 that this creature got its name, lizard of the Meuse River, and by then most of the evidence was coming from North America. Fossils were discovered along the northeast coast and in the Midwest, the deduction being that Mosasaurus occupied the Atlantic Ocean as well as the western interior seaway, and occupy they did. Head to tail, the most generous estimate of Mosasaurus is 56 feet, an approximation derived from the length of the creature's lower jaw. 5 feet 7 inches is the largest lower jaw specimen of Mosasaurus ever discovered, and gives us confidence that this creature could eat anything it wanted. A toothed perimeter of heavy spikes, powered by immense mastication muscles, its mouth could crush through turtles like a communion wafer. I'll read that again. A toothed perimeter of heavy spikes, powered by immense mastication muscles, its mouth could crush through turtles like a communion wafer. Aft of its jagged and foreboding mouth are gigantic eyes. They would have provided exceptional visual acuity and may have made up for a relatively poor sense of smell. Ocular cavities on the sides of her wedge-shaped head allows for a mixture of binocular and two-dimensional vision. Looking down the face of the animal, you will notice a deep-barreled chest, made possible by a nearly perfect semicircle rib cage. The combination of these two, excellent vision with a large chest cavity, would have allowed Mosasaurus to occupy dark, deep waters as comfortably as a priest in a confessional. She has a pair of front and back flippers that are used as a steering wheel, and her long, broad tail does the engine work. So much work, in fact, that Mosasaurus may have been endothermic, producing enough heat to maintain a constant body temperature, regardless of surrounding environment. Powering such a metabolism would require constant hunting. Whipping her colossal tail behind, she will travel as far as any missionary in search of prey, and is as efficient at bringing down sinners. Regarding their occupation of ocean habitats, their presence was as transformative as any evangelical. Fossil evidence suggests complete turnover of local fauna following the emergence of Mosasaurus, especially shallower seaways. An otherwise diverse ecosystem collapsed under the pressure of a demigod, by the way, that gave birth to live young, upwards of 5 at a time, and most likely traveled in familial groups. But it isn't Pat's tyrannical jaws or imposing bulk that captures Saber's attention. It isn't even the fact that she has a dozen smaller killers in her company. Killers that aren't her children or even her grandchildren, but the widow's great-grandchildren. Tractor beaming the old grizzly's focus are two blazing spears, the killer nun's phoenix flame eyes. Yes, like Talon, our savagely savvy Senonicosaurus, Pat's descendants were impervious in life and could only be extinguished by a celestial event. A city-wide asteroid that struck ocean bedrock near the Yucatan Peninsula, the falling rock decimated the worst monsters your planet has ever created. Emerging in the late Cretaceous, Mosasaurus lived for 16 million years and was unequaled until the Phoenix brought them here. Now these killers swim in Cairo's infinite ocean, and a select few, namely priests and nuns in Tidal's holy service, see with red eyes. At 97 quanta, this is Pat's 5th run, and she has developed a taste for foolish opportunists. While never existing at the same time, Mosasaurus and Spinosaurus are roughly comparable in size and would be evenly matched under normal circumstances. But unfortunately for Saber, Tidal's killer nuns are anything but normal. Providing each host with protection and ability, the Phoenix has kept Pat alive when her body should have succumbed to natural ailments long ago. Bone damage alone brought on by repeated deep water decompressions should have killed the old widow by now. Yet the killer nun endures. Alarmingly, because Mosasaurus is a reptile and can grow indefinitely with sufficient space and food, the Phoenix has enabled Pat to reach twice her natural size. Blocking out the behemoth, Saber closes his eyes and charges for the surface. Hopeful that gas exchange will refresh his reality, he tucks in tight and uses his tail to cleave a furious wake. Breaking through the plane, the open-air lungs bring him calm. There's fading after like glimmers gold on the water surface, and for a moment Saber is able to process his petulance. Foolish and far away is the gilded buzz of youth and the farce of chasing it. Zial's bug meat has always been more than enough. Now if he could only get back up to the shelf. Snapping him out of his introspection are 12 curious killers. Like hours on a clock, they have him surrounded. Nanos ticking by, they blitz at him one at a time. Bolting by, taking a snip here and a snatch there. Their joy is obvious as they swallow his live flesh, and Saber would be disgusted if he wasn't so envious. The silver butcher catches one rushing at him, and the old grizzly fillets the junior Moser in front of the others. There is a sense of pride and relief from the spined lizard as he ravages the youngling's underbelly. The remaining 11 back away from the scene, and at first the old grizzly thinks the little runts are afraid of him. Then he remembers the flaming red eyes. Closing his own, he knows this is the end. The next sensation he feels is being ejected from Tidal's arms. Storming up from below, Pat blasts him in the trunk and carries them both out of the water. When the grizzly butcher opens his eyes again, he is looking down his tail. The killer nun has snapped him like a carrot. Back in the water, Pat thrashes at the kinked carcass, liberating edible portions of Spinosaurus for her den to harvest. Each will have their belly full, and what they don't eat will be taken by Tidal's shark as scavengers. As for the old grizzly's still beating heart, the killer nun discards it before it can intoxicate any of her kin. On the surface, Thea's sun moonlight shines down on Tidal's most recent bloodbath. Beautiful in its own way, she sees the reality and tragedy and holds the black blue night in high regard. To her, he is the reflection of her eternal grace. To his children, he is the foundation of their very existence. Through him, with him, in him.